Hello and welcome to Global Eye. I'm Parikshit Luthra. The big international story we are tracking this evening. Israel Defense Forces continue to pound Gaza with airstrikes and have claimed to have encircled the Gaza city as the death toll of Palestinians crossed the 9,000 mark. The IDF is planning to deepen its ground offensive inside Gaza. The Israeli military also claimed there was an exchange of fire at the Israel-Lebanon border where it allegedly killed a group of Hezbollah fighters. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken met Netanyahu in Tel Aviv. While addressing a press conference, Blinken reiterated that Israel has the right to do everything possible to ensure the 7th October attack does not happen again. He also said that it's necessary to protect civilians caught in the crossfire. These statements come a day after U.S. President Joe Biden called for a humanitarian pause in the war. We're now joined by Major Libby Weiss, spokesperson of the Israel Defense Forces. Major Libby, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Let me begin by asking you, in terms of neutralizing Hamas's ability to strike Israel, how much has been achieved and to what extent have you been able to dismantle the terror infrastructure of the Hamas?
Well, we certainly have made progress, but we understand that this is going to be a long effort. We know that Hamas is deeply ingrained within the Gaza Strip and certainly within the civilian areas within the Gaza Strip. But we continue to target Hamas. And just yesterday, 130 Hamas terrorists were targeted and eliminated by Israel. And we continue to do that. And we'll do it as long as necessary.
What about rockets being fired against Israel from Gaza? Could you give us a sense whether the attack from there has declined or the number of strikes coming from Gaza continues to be at the same level?
Well, since the start of this war, since October 7th, Hamas has launched more than 9,000 rockets towards Israel, covering large portions of the country in rocket fire. And just in the last few days, there has still been sirens and rocket fire towards Tel Aviv. So this is something that we understand is another one of the efforts that Hamas is making to terrorize Israelis.
Right. When it comes to the question of a humanitarian pause, and I believe this is what Secretary Blinken is also urging Prime Minister Netanyahu to do, have a humanitarian pause so that aid can flow into Gaza. Is Israel likely to allow that, or is that all subject to the hostages being released?
Well, this is very much a political issue and one that the politicians will have to decide, and the IDF will facilitate whatever decision is made. I do want to emphasize that humanitarian aid is currently going into the Gaza Strip, and in the last 11 days, more than 300 trucks have entered, but we will do whatever the government decides on this issue and facilitate it as much as possible.
When it comes to limiting this conflict, there is a lot of worry. One, about the humanitarian crisis, about this becoming a genocide, as some countries and some bodies have pointed out. UAE has warned against the risk of a regional spillover. What will Israel do to limit the scale of this conflict and to stop this from becoming a regional war?
Well, we've already taken significant steps to minimize the impact on civilians within the Gaza Strip. And I'd like to add here that I believe we are the only party in this conflict that actually has any concern for civilians on either side of the conflict. And more than 2 weeks ago, we provided notice to civilians to move from the northern part of the Gaza Strip to the south, an area that we have designated as being safer. We did this to our operational detriment, but we did this because the civilians in Gaza are not our target. And we know that more than 8,000 have moved towards the southern part of the Strip. And we also know that Hamas is making it difficult for those who remain. And right now, the responsibility and pressure should be on Hamas to care for their own civilian population and to make sure that civilians are moved to areas that are safer at this time. But we are making significant efforts to mitigate the impact on civilians, and we are the only party doing that as of now.
Right. Now, what is the ultimate objective of this invasion, of the military operation that's taking place? Do you think things can start slowing down, winding down, if the hostages are released? Any clarity if you could give us now on what are the major objectives emerging as this war has now been going on for over 3 weeks?
We have two very clear goals, and I would say they go hand in hand with one another. One is to dismantle Hamas and make sure that Hamas is never in a position of power to launch terror against Israelis. We saw just a month ago what happens when Hamas has the capacity and the ability to commit acts of terror against Israelis. And we saw the massacre and we saw the slaughter that took place of more than 1,400 Israelis. So first, we will make sure that they never can do that again. And second, equally important, is the release of the hostages. We have 241 Israelis who are being held, and the fastest way, and it's important to emphasize this, the fastest way for them to come home would be for Hamas to release them immediately without any terms or conditions. The fact that Hamas took them in such a violent and horrific way is a war crime, and the international community should be putting pressure on Hamas to release them immediately. But their return is also a top priority for us, and those goals together go hand in hand, and we believe we can accomplish both.
Right. Major Libby, thank you so much for joining us on the program with all the updates on the ground and the major objectives at present. We're now joined by Wael Awad, political analyst and West Asia expert. Mr. Awad, thank you very much for joining us on the program. As you hear the Israel Defense Ministry, Israel Defense Forces spokesperson saying that their objective remains complete elimination of Hamas's ability to carry out attacks, a full release of hostages as well. What is the risk that you're seeing of this escalating? There has been talk about the involvement of the Hezbollah, involvement of Iran and some of Iran-supported groups as well.
Thank you, Barishik. I think what is the major issue here is either is the objective is seriously to eliminate Hamas. If it is the objective to eliminate Hamas, that what we are witnessing on the ground is the total genocide. We have been seeing that each one fighter of Hamas is costing 10,000 of a Palestinian's life, because there are 2.3 million Palestinians staying in Gaza Strip, which is a concentration camp. Everybody knows this. And now we can see the people who are fleeing, where the Israeli telling them to move from the north to the south and following them by the drone and by the machine guns and killing them one by one in the street. You can see the dead body. You can see lots of videos emerging from Gaza where all these people have been killed. So if this is continue for no reason, just to ethnic cleansing and empty Palestine from the Palestinians, then I think the regional war will be expanded and Israel will not be safe, neither today nor in the future, because what is happening on the ground, Barishik, is a clear indication that there is no way of return unless and until you sit down across the table to find a political solution. But if you continue with this fast killing, I think then we are heading for a more trouble to happen, because violence will bring violence and it will expand for sure.
Mr. Awad, I'd also like to ask you about a conversation which has taken place between Prime Minister Modi and the President of the UAE. And both sides have discussed the deteriorating security situation and loss of civilian lives in the war between Israel and Hamas. They've spoken about the need for an early resolution of the security and humanitarian situation. So how do you see India's concern, India's stand, vis-a-vis India's stand at the start of this war?
I think India is very much on the record of knowing and witnessing and cautiously witnessing and observing what's happening on the ground, because the killing in Palestine and the Gaza Strip, to be frank, is beyond anybody's imagination. So I think all this anger in the streets of the Arab world, in India, in the West, is a clear indication that nobody can take it lightly, because here we are seeing people getting killed. The humanitarian issues is very much, and that is why I think this talk with the Prime Minister, with different leaders, not only with the UAE, but also with the Egyptian, with the other stakeholders, is a clear indication that is also a worrisome time for India, because India have a stake at the West Asian affairs in the GCC. It has more than 8 million people, Indian living there. And there are 14 million Indian visit annually. We have also revenue of more than $75 billion annually to India, plus the food security and energy security. So India can play a major role in calling for a halt of all hostilities and go and apply and adhere to the UN Security Council resolutions in this regard.
Right. Mr. Awad, when it comes to the Arab world, when it comes to the Middle East, who is in the strongest position right now? We heard the IDF spokesperson, and she said that we hope and urge the international community to put pressure on Hamas to release the hostages. Now, when it comes to mediation, when it comes to back-channel diplomacy, who really holds the keys in the Middle East currently?
Well, I don't want to comment on a PR exercise and American accents who was supposed to be an Israelis. I don't really believe on all this barikat. My only concern here is that there are backdoor talks. There are already diplomacy in Qatar where the Israelis are meeting with the Hamas leadership's representative there, including the United States representative. And I think frantically they are trying to find a face-saving formula to release the Israelis hostages from Hamas and also an exchange of prisoners. But till now, Netanyahu is refusing to accept this kind of barter because that will not keep him in power because he's already having cases against him in a weak government. I think what we have been witnessing now is that everybody wanted to find a solution and sort of hostility ending because some sector in the Israeli ultra-nationalist party are calling to take full advantage of the current situation since the American and the West are fully behind Israel. So that let us expel the Palestinians into Gaza, into Sinai Peninsula. But I think the Egyptian and the Jordanian understand the game plan. They will not allow West Bank Palestinians to be kicked out of West Bank and East Jerusalem to Jordan, nor they will allow the Palestinians to be kicked into Sinai Peninsula. But I think, Barikshit, the important part here is that the plot has been exposed and what is being declared as objectives is seriously, they are not the objectives because we cannot, while we are talking, we are counting dead body in the street and all of them, I mean, few only from the Hamas are civilian, are paying the price. And the cold in wartime and peacetime. And there was no peace in Palestine till now.
All right. So very, very complicated political interests as well on the ground, conflicting interests. Very difficult to find middle ground right now. But thanks very much, Wael Awad, for joining us. We're going to take a short break, but coming up, 28 nations have signed an agreement affirming the potential of AI and calling for heightened security and regulations. India, US, UK, even China are among the signatories to the Bletchley Declaration. A special discussion when we're back. Welcome back. You're watching Global Eye. This week has seen two major developments in the field of artificial intelligence. US President Joe Biden signed an executive order for safe and secure development of AI. The order calls for new safety standards, protecting privacy, and steps to boost innovation and competition, among others. Just days after, leaders from 28 nations gathered in the UK for a summit and signed the Bletchley Declaration. India, US, UK are among the signatories. So what does this really mean for AI governance around the world? Joining us now to discuss this is Alex Krasnodonsky, Senior Research Associate at the Digital Society Initiative at Chatham House, and Gopi Kathragada, President of the Institute of Engineering and Technology. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Alex, let me begin with you. What is the importance of the Bletchley Declaration, according to you, especially when it comes to advancing cooperation on AI?
Thanks for having me. The importance of the Bletchley Declaration, I think, is best measured in who has signed it rather than what is necessarily on the page. It is a necessarily quite high-level document that talks about safety and responsibility when it comes to the sort of use and development of AI. It is not too specific, but it is significant that, as you laid out at the start of this segment, we do have signatories from including India, the EU, the UK, the US, and also China. And that is a step forward in terms of global cooperation on the future of this technology.
Right. Yes, the signatories are significant. Dr. Gopi, Rishi Sunak said that most advanced tech companies will allow governments to vet their AI tools. Meta, Google, DeepMind, OpenAI agreeing to allow users to test their latest AI products. How significant is this? And do you think there are any real teeth to this announcement?
No, I think the announcement is significant in many ways. I think it recognizes where the action is, and the action is on the ground with the users who are using the tools, which are rolling out at a very fast pace. And it is pretty much impossible for regulators to keep pace. Whereas as users and as developers and as people who have been waiting for this moment and engineering this moment for the past 30 years, we know best how to look for issues, in data and ethical data aspects, how to look for issues in AI impact, where it's being used. So I think it's a very good way to look at enabling safe AI.
Right. And one of the aims, of course, was also to slow the race to develop systems that can compete with humans. Alex, what do you feel about the conversation between Elon Musk and Rishi Sunak? Elon Musk going on to say that AI is the most disruptive force in history. There will come a point when no job is needed. On the other hand, there was also talk about creating a skilled workforce, making sure that workplace displacement is at its bare minimum. How do you think both the benefits and drawbacks of AI will be balanced by the discussions that happened at Bletchley Park?
It's an interesting question, and it's certainly an interesting sight to see the richest man on the planet being interviewed by a prime minister in an event that a number of political commentators here in the UK have described as extremely strange. I think we would be cautious before reading too much into Elon Musk's suggestions. We've heard for many, many years how technology is going to create more free time, less time spent on work. None of that has come true yet. In fact, quite the opposite. We've seen that technological advancements have led to things like the gig economy, Uber, Deliveroo, where actually working conditions have got sort of actually significantly worse. So let's be a little bit cautious before we say that AI is going to free us all to never work again and that somehow it's all going to be okay. There will be huge disruption. There will be a changing of the guard when it comes to the kinds of jobs that are becoming less and less needed, and obviously new jobs will replace them. That's all a little bit unknown. It's critical that governments have a role in easing, managing, setting the roadmap for that transition, because left only in the hands of private companies, we've seen that play out before, and it can lead to, I think, quite a lot of disruption for ordinary people trying to get to grips with a very fast changing world.
Right. Dr. Gopi, coming to you, when it comes to the executive order that has been signed by the US, where do you think this is in terms of having global regulations? How is it going to impact businesses immediately? One of the important points is that developers of powerful AI systems will have to share test results and critical information with the government. So how will this impact companies which are working in the United States and working with companies connected to the United States and other jurisdictions, including India?
I think similar to the emission norms, if you can use an analogy for automotives, these kind of regulations will require, similar to the automotive companies showing their ability to meet growing standards on emission norms, growing standards around data privacy, fairness of the wage that you pay for data workers, and also to demonstrate that their technology will not be used and there's an end use kind of an agreement. All of these have been implemented in the past through various other regulations. So this is not new for the US. And it's important for the US to take a lead also because most of the investments into the companies have been in the US, tens of billions of dollars. And so it is good to see this leadership being exhibited by the US in data safety as well. But the the main aspect of its implementation will come when all countries move together, because you cannot have imbalanced regulations of one country saying you can use copyrighted material for training neural networks and other countries not following suit. So it will have to balance out for this to be implementable. So both Biden's executive order and the work done by Rishi Sunak and team in the UK are equally important starting points. But I do agree also with the discussion that jobs going away is something that might not happen in our lifetimes for sure, and might not happen at all unless we stop being creative.
Right. That's an important point, Dr. Gopi. But Alex, coming back to you, one of the points from the Biden executive order was to provide clear guidance to prevent AI algorithms from being used to exacerbate discrimination, make sure they are used for the right purposes. And he also called on the Congress to pass data privacy legislation. The immediate implications for companies in the United States and how they function in global jurisdictions. How difficult would it be for companies to comply with some of these directions in the executive order?
History has shown that the US is pretty unwilling to put too firm a set of regulations around its industries, particularly its digital industries, certainly by comparison to other parts of the world. The EU is a really good example of one. And I think we have to understand that the backdrop of this whole conversation is an understanding that many governments, but also industries, see AI as a critical part of their future development and their future competitiveness in the world economy. So look, it's good to see that the US executive order does touch on these short-term risks, these problems of today and frankly also yesterday. Discrimination by algorithm, for instance, whether or not you are issued a credit card or whether or not your mortgage is approved. These are often decisions that are made by algorithm. They are decisions that are made today, and they are often decisions that we perhaps don't understand quite how they might work, and potentially those they create risk of bias. That is not a conversation that we had so much of here in the UK. It is good that it's taking place in the US, but I think we should be cautious about expecting the US to really rein in its AI industry, particularly at a time of quite sort of strict global competition between, let's say, the US and China or other parts of the world.
Right. Professor Gopi, Dr. Gopi, I've run out of time, but one quick question. How should India respond to these fast-changing developments and rules globally? If you can tell us in about 20 seconds.
Yeah, so India has a significant market from energy to healthcare to transportation. All of these areas are going to be impacted by AI. And the directions which NASSCOM, CII, the industry have provided the government already cover what US is claiming to be groundbreaking regulations, and also what has been discussed in UK. So I think we are on the right path. We are aware of how to go about in this digital economy, of which AI is just a part, even though it's a significant part going forward.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Gopi and Alex, for joining us on the program, telling us about the big takeaways from the AI summit in UK and Biden's executive order on regulating AI as well. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Global Eye. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.